Hey there, Eli coming at you again from OSA Coventry, here again in front of our beautiful planted display tank to give another little update. As you can see behind me, this tank is starting to fill up quite nicely. Pretty packed in stem plants at the moment, and stuff is starting to reach toward the surface. I have on occasion trimmed a few of these plants back, but I figured today I would give you guys a little bit of an inside look at how I take care of this tank and the maintenance that goes into this on about a weekly or bi-weekly basis. But as you can see, a lot of these plants are starting to get a little bit bushy. They're getting a little tall, especially like the bacopas up front. So I'm hoping to trim some of these back, and I was going to show you guys a little bit on how we can make these plants grow in a little bit fuller down the road. Many of you may not know, but with stem plants, they're pretty easy to propagate, and it's as simple as cutting them basically at any point along the stem, removing up a couple leaves from the bottom, and you can plant those stems right back in the substrate. And generally they are going to root pretty well after doing so. So without further ado, I'm going to pull about 40 gallons of water out of this tank. That's about a 25% water change. And one of the nice things about running a planted freshwater tank is oftentimes you don't always have to flip over the substrate like you typically would in just a fish only freshwater tank. A lot of times the plants are going to help to take care of some of the detritus that builds up in the substrate. So we don't necessarily need to be as thorough with turning over the substrate. But I do like to get nice and close to the roots with the siphon just to pull out some of that waste. Now that some water's drained out of this tank and I pulled as much of the waste as I could out of the rock work in between the plants, I'm gonna come in and trim out some of these plants. Some of these things like this wisteria here are getting some algae growth on some of the older leaves, and certain plants are getting a little too tall, like these bacopas up top. So I'm gonna trim out any ugly or algae covered leaves just so that doesn't start to spread from here on out. And some of these plants I'm gonna trim back and replant the tops just so they can kind of fill in that space a little bit easier. Like I mentioned earlier, when trimming the stem plants, a lot of times that will induce the plant to branch from where you cut it from. And then that top portion can be replanted right back into the substrate and will start its own planting again. Now, as you can see, we're already starting to get some really healthy root growth on a lot of these plants, which is really cool. It's only been about a month, maybe 5 weeks since this tank started running, and stuff is already growing pretty damn well. So as this tank fills in as well, I'm noticing a couple plants are kind of maybe in the wrong spots. This Hygrophila compacta here was kind of getting shaded out by the rest of the plants around it. So I'm gonna move this and then put something else in its place. Alrighty, so I got the chance to trim some stuff back, remove some dirty leaves, and replant some stuff, maybe move some things around so they start to fill in a little bit better and work a little bit better in the space that I've got to work with. For the next few days or so, some of these plants might look a little silly, look a little bit more bare than they usually were beforehand. But with the CO2 and with the dosing regime that I've been keeping up with, stuff is gonna fill in pretty quickly. After doing a big trim like this is the perfect time to either bundle up some of those plants to trade with friends. They make a great fertilizer for your compost bin or for your plants outside if you didn't have use for some of those trimmings. And otherwise, this would be a great opportunity to make sure that your CO2 tank still has the proper amount of gas in it. A great time to re-add any root tabs or any other fertilizers to the aquarium, and just make sure overall that the health of your plants and your fish is doing pretty well. I'm just gonna wrap up pretty quickly, take out the rest of the floating trimmings in this tank, and fill the tank right back up. Thank you guys for tuning in. Hope you found this information at least interesting, and I will keep you guys up to date as to how this tank fills in down the road again. Hopefully this was a useful way to kind of clean this tank up a little bit, let it fill in a little bit better, and I hope for this tank to keep looking even nicer into the future. As always, feel free to leave comments, questions, suggestions in the comment section below. Thank you guys for tuning in, and as always, keep it fishy.